All right, hello everyone, Rob here with Precodecamp.com, and in this video we're just going to show a simple example on how we can have a standard HTML file with some JavaScript, and we're going to loop through an array of data and get it to display on the HTML page. So again, this is for the beginners out there that are just learning a little bit about DOM manipulation and how to get data to display based off of maybe an API that you end up using, or just in this case, it's just going to be a simple array of names to just get it to list out for us. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I'm going to be in Visual Studio Code, and again, you can use whatever code editor that you plan on using, but if you are new to Visual Studio Code, make sure you check out the link down below in this video. It will take you to a series of videos to get your Visual Studio Code up and running with the tools that I'm going to be utilizing. So first thing that we're going to do in Visual Studio Code is we need two files. And again, you can name whatever file that you would like. For this, I just named it HTML structure.html. So that's the first one that we need. But all we really care about is it's a .html. We really don't care about what the name of it is. Next one is a simple JavaScript file that we created, brand new, and that's index.js. And those are the two files that you're going to need. Again, if you need to create those files, you can just use this little new file icon up here in order to create those. So when we have an HTML file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some boilerplate code to this. And so it's really simple in Visual Studio Code to add boilerplate. And all we have to do is use the exclamation mark and hit the tab button. And you're going to see a lot of code is already on your page now. So we're going to be utilizing this page, and we're going to be attaching the javascript.js file to this, and that needs to go in between the body. So we're going to put that at the very bottom, and in Visual Studio Code, if you just start typing out script, notice that we have one called src. Well, that's what we're going to use, and what goes in between these quotes here is going to be the file of JavaScript. So we want the index, and notice Visual Studio Code is automatically completing this part here for us. So the next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to utilize an extension that you can freely download off the extension shop. It's called Live Server, which means that any time that we make changes, it will automatically be shown in the browser. And usually you'll see it down here. I already have mine running, but if you don't, all you have to do is right click and then click this button right here, this menu option that says Open with Live Server, and you'll see something that looks a lot like this. Just an empty web page for now. Let's visit our JavaScript file and go into there. Now I have some notes kind of typed in this, you'll see, but really what I want you to type in here is just console log hello. I want to make sure that this page is linked up. There's so many times that students, when they're first learning how to do this, they don't link up the JavaScript file to their HTML document file. And they're like, hey, all this code that I'm typing is not working. And the best way to do this, whenever you just create an index.js or a JavaScript file and you're trying to link it to the page, just do a simple console log, because we're going to see it in the browser. So let's go back to the browser and take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to it as well. And if we hit the 12 button on your keyboard, or if you right click and inspect, you're going to see that we have this little up here. It's called console. And let me go ahead and refresh just to see the hello. And there we go. So now I know that it is properly linked, and I'm seeing a console log right here. So now we can finally get into our problem that we want to try to solve, which is this right here. We want to have a list of names that we are wanting to loop through. And so whenever we come to a problem, I'm always trying to break this down into some simple steps, simple logical steps. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need that list of names. And for that list of names, I'm just going to make it really simple with this, and we're just going to create a variable with an array of names, Jane, Alex. Nothing really special with that at all. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to just make a normal for loop and just console log the individual names, because eventually we want to progress and actually get them to display on the web page rather than the console log, right? That's the goal of this. So let's go ahead and try this out. And for that, we're just going to start off with a normal for loop, right? And we want to start off this iteration here. This is the iteration. We're starting off with I equals 0, which means the 0 spot here. And we want to stay in this array until the very end. And so we have to call out our length of our array. So that's where that comes from. And then this is just our simple iterator, meaning that at the end of each loop, we're going to add 1 to it. So it's going to go from 0 to 1, 0 to, then it's going to go to 2, right? So let's go ahead and test this out and just see if we can get that to display inside of our console. All right, so let's take a look at it. So if we're looking at the console, we now should see the names, right? And so let's take a look at that. We have hello, which is what we console logged there. And matter of fact, let me see if I can increase the size of this so that way we might be able to see. Looks like we might not be able to, but we have hello, we have John, Jane, and Alex. And again, it gives us what line number our console log is coming from, which makes that nice to know. But so now we're getting it to display in the console. Well, how do we get it to display over on the HTML page, right? How do we get those names to actually show up to normal users, because they're not going to look in the console for this, right? So that's where we're trying to go from here. So let's go back to the code. We need to go back actually to the HTML document and add a few more lines of code in there. So we need to put a place, we need to put a div, right, inside of the body where we would like these names to go, all right? And so for that, I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to do div with a hashtag on here. And then I'm going to type out display names. And I'm going to hit the tab button. Again, Visual Studio Code does this for us, which is really nice. It provides us with adding a new attribute here that we see here, which is called an ID. And then we have something there called display names. So that's really all I want to do here. Now I can go to the JavaScript file, because what we want to do is we want to tell our JavaScript, we're going to say, hey, there's an ID out here called display names, and we want to inject some HTML in there, but we want to inject the names. So let's look at what that would look like inside of our JavaScript. So this is where I said that we just need to refactor the code in order to work with the DOM. And so whenever we have the ability to work with the DOM, we need to actually go out there. I call it fishing. We need to go fish for this ID out here that we see. And that I'm just going to do something like this. We're going to create a variable. We're going to call it display names, just what you see here. And this is our query selector. This is how we're going to interact with the DOM, or the document object model. And here, this is what I love about query selectors, is I always tell the students, like, what did we use over here in Visual Studio Code in order to get this ID to populate? Well, we used the hashtag or the pound sign in order to get that to work. Well, with the query selector, it's going to look at that HTML page, and it's going to look to see, hey, where do I find something on this HTML page with an ID of display names? So once we store that into memory, now we have access to do a lot of neat things to it. I put on here, we need to refactor the code in order to work with the DOM. So this is the first step. We're just going to go fishing for that ID that's out there. And then the next thing is we're just going to take that same for loop, right? And we're just going to modify it a little bit. Instead of console logging the names, we actually want to do the following. We want to do this. So let's look at the difference here based off of our very first for loop that we have. So we have console log. So we don't see any console log here. So we are now saying, hey, you know what? This thing that we went fishing for, it has a property there where it's called inner HTML. And that's where we're able to replace the HTML that's in there with these little backticks with each one, and then we have the names inside here, right? So again, the only thing that's really different than this console log and this right here is we went fishing for the display names, and we are replacing the inner HTML, and we're just adding this HTML every time we go through the loop. So we're just adding it onto each other, and we'll see this in the actual HTML. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's take a look at what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at it as well. So we have John, Jane, and Alex. They're all being displayed. And let's take a look at the actual HTML. So I'm selecting this little selector up here and selecting it. And notice that this is our H1 tags that we were doing before, right? So we have John, Jane, and Alex, right? So if we look at our code here, H1, and it goes with the first name, which is John. Then it moves on to the next one, Jane. And it moves on to the next one, Alex. And again, this plus equals could be familiar to you from your journey with JavaScript. We're just adding it on to each other, compiling all of the names into one long string, and then it's letting the browser interpret it to display what you actually see on the screen. So I know that might have been a little bit confusing with this. Hopefully more practice that you get with JavaScript and the DOM aspect of this, because again, multiple ways to tackle this problem, but this is just a real simple way to get an array worth of data to show up. Now, once you start working with APIs, you're going to get more complex objects, and that's where you're going to have to start utilizing notation and stuff in order to access the information. But just as a real safe beginner type of lesson feel for the DOM and getting loops, this should work as a really good tutorial for you to fall back on and rewatch and try to go through it again, and try it with different things. See if you can get an actual object inside of this instead of it just all being names, right? So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you on the next one.